For all the old school conspiracy theorists, I'm going to cover this segment and interject. I might have to do it in parts though because it's rather long. So, offline with Jon Favreau. Um, that doesn't look like Jon Favreau. I don't know who these people are. Well, I know one of them is the journalist who covered the story and wrote a book about it. But all right, let's go. Let's go.
Fox, it's important to understand, does not originate these kinds of theories. But Fox is the place where if a story, a conspiracy theory like Seth Rich or The Big Lie gains enough traction in the world of Fox viewers, usually online, it goes upward, it goes upward, it goes upward, and then eventually it gets to Fox. And so Fox it's really the center of the conservative media universe. It is the ultimate megaphone.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that Fox spends more time looking at Reddit and Twitter and 8chan and 4chan for conspiracy theories to report on than they do actually reporting on real news. They don't report on real news at all.
It is the ultimate validator.
I'm Jon Favreau. Welcome to Offline. Hey everyone, my guest this week is Andy Kroll, a ProPublica journalist and author of the book A Death on W Street, which examines the Fox News-fueled conspiracy surrounding the 2016 murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich. You may have noticed that our friends at Fox have been in the headlines lately. Thanks to Dominion Voting Systems' defamation lawsuit against the network, a trove of texts, emails, and testimony from Fox News hosts and executives have given us an unprecedented look into the right-wing media empire, the way they lie, spread conspiracies, and basically treat their audience like idiots.
Yeah.
But this isn't the first time Fox News has been sued for defamation. In May of 2017, Fox News hosts across the network began spreading a disgusting conspiracy about the death of Seth Rich, a promising young DNC staffer who was tragically shot and killed on his way home from a bar in the summer of 2016. They claimed his death was suspicious and implied that it was Seth, not the Russian government, that hacked the DNC and gave all those emails to WikiLeaks. Fox's story was, of course, bullshit, but the network spread it anyway until Seth's parents decided to fight back. As we're all watching the Dominion case unfold, I wanted to talk.
He doesn't mention it, but he did put a clip up of Julian Assange. And I imagine they'll probably get to this, but the whole reason that conspiracy theory was circulated is because Julian Assange tweeted out that he was going to pay a reward. I don't remember what the sum was. I don't remember what the total amount was, but he was going to pay a reward for information leading to finding the killer of Seth Rich. And so he heavily implied that Seth Rich was meaningful to his organization, and he did that on purpose. So that's why the libertarians, the Greens, the Republicans all thought that somehow Seth Rich was involved in the DNC leak. And some of them also attributed Seth to the Podesta leak too. But these are two separate things. The DNC was hacked a year before, I think. I think it was, well, no, it had to have been just based on the material that was in that dump. It had to have been somewhere around maybe April or May that they got hacked. And the problem was, because I looked this up too, and I imagine he'll get into the details of it, but the IT manager they had working at the DNC at the time was a contract employee. He was not a permanent employee. And I did look at his LinkedIn profile, and he describes the work that he did at the DNC as migrating their systems to, I want to say it was like 90% cloud services. And so they were using Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure, which are the only two FBI rated cloud services, which also the FBI uses. But earlier in these timelines, there were some security issues with the cloud. And during Barack Obama's time as president, his 2 terms, he had started a large infrastructure program. This was part of the recovery bills from the 2008. Part of the infrastructure was to start promoting these cloud services. I'll get back to that.
Andy about his book, since he's now an expert in the inner workings of Fox and what it takes to actually hold the network accountable. We had a great conversation about what goes on behind the scenes at Fox, how the network has become both a megaphone and a validator for online conspiracies, and what it's like to report on the darkest corners of the internet. Andy Kroll, welcome to Offline.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I've been eager to talk to you about Dominion's defamation lawsuit against Fox because you wrote a book about the last defamation case that Fox settled, that with the family of Seth Rich, a Democratic National Committee staffer who was killed in 2016 and then became the subject of crazy right-wing conspiracy theories that Fox repeatedly aired without any proof. So I want to start there and then get to Dominion a little bit later. How did you first become interested in the story of Seth Rich's murder?
It's a fittingly weird origin story for an extremely weird and at times unbelievable actual story. You know, a reporter like me bouncing around Washington, D.C., we get stories from sources, from tips, from something we read in the news. That's how this business works. But in the case of Seth Rich, I actually knew the guy. I had met him. We had run in the same social circles, like mid-20-something young guys who come to D.C. after college who think they're going to make some big difference in the world. It's just he went off into politics and I went into journalism. So when he's killed in the summer of 2016, in that fever dream of a moment in recent American history that was the 2016 campaign, it's this, really sad and tragic moment for people who knew him well, people who loved him, but also people who hadn't met him, in a sort of casual way like myself. And then after that tragedy happens, you kind of expect the thing to happen that always happens, which is the story fades from the news. His family has this moment to grieve, to remember him, to process this horrible event. But instead what happens is his life and his death gets swept into the conspiratorial updraft of American politics at that time. And I'm sitting at home.
Yeah, and part of that was people were going to his Facebook profile, myself included, and there was, I think, at least one post that indicated that he was progressive in his values. So part of the conspiracy theory became that he was a Bernie bro. And that played right into the anger of everybody who had just read the DNC leaks and were exceptionally upset at Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Brazil and Hillary because of what was revealed in that particular email dump. So they assumed that he was a Bernie bro trying to expose the story, right? But there's nothing on, maybe if he has friends only posts, but I don't think he does. Otherwise they would have, somebody on his list would have leaked it, that would have validated that he actually had a preference, which I doubt he would have done anything like that if he was an employee of the DNC, because you cannot outwardly support a candidate when you work for the party.
Watching this at my desk at work, watching this, one day I remember seeing Seth Rich's name trend on Twitter, and it's almost like seeing like a family member's name trend on Twitter. You think, how on earth is this possibly happening? And really from that moment onward, August, September of 2016, I was just obsessed with this story and had to understand why it turned into this massive international fiasco that it did.
So, before we get into why it turned into this international fiasco and this viral story, what do we actually know about the circumstances of Seth's death?
Yeah, and the circumstances are important. They are conveniently glossed over by the people who make this into something conspiratorial and nefarious. Seth is at a bar in early July 2016. He is drinking at the bar by himself, going through some personal issues. He has an offer to go work on the Clinton campaign, doing voter registration, get out the vote. But his personal relationship with a woman in D.C. is broken up, and the chances of this getting repaired are not great if he moves to Brooklyn to take a political campaign job. So he's at this bar till pretty late, and he decides that instead of taking an Uber or taxi home, he wants to walk home from Northwest DC to a neighborhood a mile and a half, 2 miles away called Bloomingdale. And, something he loved to do. He was always walking around DC or biking around DC, preferred to see our nation's capital from that vantage point.
Something all of us who lived in DC and have been out to a bar late have done.
Right, exactly.
Hold up. There, part of the conspiracy theory, I don't know if he's going to cover this, is that there was a man at that bar who was somehow connected to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And so they've increased the conspiracy theory by saying that guy was the culprit. He was probably the one who did it, because there was some sort of investigation done on him and I think one of his relatives a couple of years later, and he is somehow connected to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So that's how it gets a little deeper. Yeah, it's interesting that it's disturbing that Fox did what they did with this particular story, because they didn't cover it in such a way as we're just trying to find the truth in the story. They covered it in such a way as to amplify a conspiracy theory without having actual facts. Maybe he'll get into the attorney. Was he a private investigator? I can't remember who that guy was. There was this black dude who got interviewed by Sean Hannity, and he had to retract everything that he said within a couple of days because he was being dishonest about the information that he supposedly uncovered from the DC police.
His neighborhood had been the site of a sort of spree of armed robberies all summer long. Again, in Bloomingdale, same MO, same kind of thing. Police are well aware of this and trying to do something about it. And unfortunately, what seems to have happened is, and what the police have said they believe have happened from the start, is that Seth was, victim of a classic wrong place, wrong time tragedy. That he was approached by someone trying to rob him. He might have resisted, and he was shot twice, and then the people who did it fled off into the night. And when I talked to detectives and homicide prosecutors and law enforcement experts, they all said this thing happens in big cities all over America all the time, unfortunately, and there was nothing about it that surprised them. But that was not the story that people online wanted to hear, wanted to believe, and so they end up taking this fairly standard street robbery and homicide into a very different direction.
So talk a little bit about that direction, and if you could sort of trace the timeline from this becoming just another unsolved murder in a big city to the first rumors popping up online, why they did, to viral conspiracy theory.
There was also speculation that as part of this conspiracy theory, there was also speculation that the police didn't handle the crime scene properly and didn't do a thorough investigation. And I'm trying to remember why people were saying that. I don't know that he died on scene. I think he actually died in the hospital, but I think we're going to find out.
I mean, the trajectory that you describe and that I lay out in the book, I found really fascinating because it is the same trajectory that so many of these crazy viral conspiracy theories follow. Yeah. Pizzagate happens a couple of months after all of this initial nonsense with Seth, and it's almost the same story. The big lie, more than 4 years later, almost the same story. I mean, it's just fascinating to pick these things apart and see how, I mean, as I write in the book, you know, I felt like kind of a social media archaeologist. I'm like going back and digging through the layers and understanding how did we get to the thing that we see? Where did it start?
Well, and you can't even like get all the layers because a lot of that stuff started getting banned, right? Especially after the election. There was this whole push. The whole fake news thing started on the Democrat side, actually. It was a Ukrainian woman who has a connection to the DNC. Her one of her daughters worked at the DNC. So there was so much nepotism and going on and connections involved in this story that it raised a lot of eyebrows, and it made it complicated to know what the truth was, and the fact that it was getting pumped up and people were believing it, you know?
And what were the steps? And, you know, what happens is almost right away, there's speculation. There are crazy posts on Reddit about, you know, that Seth Rich was murdered in mysterious circumstances. Reddit, Twitter, 4chan. I mean, all of the sort of deep, dark corners of internet conspiracy culture. What's interesting, what people forget, is that it actually started on the far, far left.
Right.
It was actually Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein people, the Green Party candidate at the time, piece of trivia for your audience, who start speculating that, oh, wow, well, the Clintons are evil. We believe that. And we believe that they'll do anything to win, including kill dozens or hundreds of people, depending on who you talk to. So clearly they must have killed this guy, Seth Rich, on their way to, you know, claiming power.
Right. That was another, he's breezing past this conspiracy theory, but there was the Clinton kill list. And the first time I heard about this sort of stuff was at a friend's birthday party who was dying of brain cancer. But he was a libertarian, and most of his friends were libertarians. And so when I was at his pool casino party, he was telling me all about this stuff. And I was like, wow, I've never heard of this before. Like, I was aware of the DNC dump. I was not aware of that they believed this Seth Rich was the leaker. And they came up with a lot of conclusions. Not that he necessarily hacked anything, but that because he had access being at the DNC headquarters, that he was able to like pull it down in like a thumb drive. They even got down to the detail of look at the download speed. You know, like people made up all kinds of crazy stuff about look at the download speed that's time stamped on these emails. And I don't even know if that's true, because I have a lot of tech knowledge, but I don't have the kind of tech knowledge to tell you what sort of systems can download that quickly. And there was the whole call for turn over the server. Where's the server? There was no server because they were using cloud services. There was no server.
That trickles along the internet
and there was
for a
just
while.
there was just this assumption that Seth was a Bernie bro, even though there was no evidence for that whatsoever.
Yeah, none at all. And when I asked his mom about this, she said, you know, Seth was a pragmatist. I mean, he's a Democrat from Omaha, Nebraska. Like, you're not usually gravitating toward the Bernie Sanders Medicare for all types when you come from a red state like that. So no, he was not a Bernie bro. There's never been any.
That's not necessarily true. I don't think that's a good argument, because I know lots of Bernie bros in Nebraska, and I've been to Nebraska and stayed with them and interviewed. You know, we had conversations. I met an entire contingent of progressives that were running for office or working on campaigns. That's unfortunate that you're misinterpreting. Like, he could have been, but correlation does not mean causation, and we don't know if he really was a Bernie bro, especially if you're adding the additional information that he actually had been offered a job on the Clinton campaign. But he did turn it down. I had not heard before that he was actually having problems with his girlfriend. That's news to me.
The evidence he was. But this is how the conspiracy psychology works.
Yeah.
You know, if there are other people saying it, and if you want to believe it, and this we'll get back to with Fox, because this is another great Fox connection, then you just try to will it into existence. So the far left people are willing into existence that Seth Rich must have been a Bernie bro who was aggrieved at the Clintons and the DNC, and he tried to expose the truth. And then when the far right picks up on this, and actually just the right writ large, Roger Stone, other people close to Trump, R. the Donald on Reddit, for people who remember that cesspool of a forum, you know, they see Seth Rich as someone who was going to expose the Clintons and who was taken out because he was going to hurt Trump, or he was going to hurt Clinton and help Trump. And each side starts to grab onto this tragedy and say, how can I use it for my own ideological advancement, to help my guy in this presidential race, whoever your candidate was. It becomes something completely different, Seth's life and death. It becomes really like a ping pong ball that people are whacking back and forth, and that they're trying to use to score points for their side in this political environment.
Yeah. There was a lot of anger from people who were supporting Bernie Sanders. There was a lot of anger there. And yeah, the Green parties, they have been taking advantage of conspiracy theories for a long time, and smear campaigns. And I can get back to that later.
And reading through your book, there's sort of like two moments that sort of pull it out of, you know, random Reddit thread, tweet that just floats a conspiracy to just some kernel of something that people grab onto. And one is Hillary Clinton mentioning Seth's name, and the other is Julian Assange. Can you just talk briefly about both of those incidents?
When you look at how these viral theories take off, it's not like a smooth line pointing upward. It looks more like, like an EKG or like a seismic measurement, where there are these spikes and troughs, and there are these big moments where something catches on. Hillary Clinton mentioning Seth in a speech soon after he was killed, a really high-profile one, was one of those moments, and it was eerie, sort of skin-prickly weird to talk to people who'd worked with Seth, who had wanted Hillary to say something to remember him, and then realizing in the moment that she did that, oh my God, this whole universe of people who believe anything connected to Hillary Clinton is evil now know the name Seth Rich. I quote someone in a book, it says, oh my God, what have we done? But the bigger spike is Julian Assange. And, Hillary Clinton, when she mentioned Seth, she was doing it out of a sense of remembrance, grief, trying to make sure that this person who had worked for the Democratic Party was remembered and not forgotten. Julian Assange's motives are clearly very different. He's just dumped all these Democratic emails into the world. He's being questioned about the provenance of these emails, when all the forensics at the time and to this day say there was hackers affiliated with Russia, and he mentions Seth's name. He does not say Seth did it. He very, very artfully, disingenuously says, our sources take risks. Hey, do you remember this guy, Seth Rich, was killed in D.C.? Our sources get worried when they see those things. And that is just, it's off the charts, the amount of people who see that and say, Assange is telling us the truth. This Seth Rich guy.
Well, on top of it, Julian Assange also said that he would not confirm nor deny because he doesn't reveal his sources. So he was really dishonest about this.
Is the leaker, he is the person that we need to focus on. And, we really can't put the genie back in the bottle after Assange says what he says. And he's never apologized or clarified it since.
Mm-hmm.
And just the idea that every intelligence agency in the U.S., people all over the world, like, all believe that Russia was the entity that dumped the emails, or and the idea that Seth Rich somehow would have been able to hack into the DNC, get these emails, and give them to. It's so fucking off the charts. But what's interesting about, you say, like, the left and the right too, it is back to that sort of horseshoe theory of politics, right? Where it's not even left like your average Bernie Sanders supporter or AOC.
I think probably it would be helpful to tell us what he did too, because I don't recall that he was actually had an IT role. And so I doubt he would have had access to this type of information. But it would probably be helpful if you said what his role was at the DNC.
We're talking like fringe, super far left, super far right. And when you get to that level, it gets a little blurry. Like, it's just a lot of people who have extremely low social trust in all institutions. And in many cases, their only interest is to burn it all down. And I feel like that's where these conspiracies really take root, and who they take root with.
That is the most fertile soil in the entire American political landscape for any of these kinds of theories. I mean, Seth Rich being one, but Pizzagate and QAnon and anti-vaccine beliefs and the big lie. Absolutely. That's where it happens. And, one of the more fascinating things I tried to do with the book was track down some of the people who said these things and wrote these things and believed these things at the time the Seth Rich conspiracy theories were taking root and sprouting up. One was a younger guy in Florida, just going into college at the time, I believe. Bernie Sanders supporter, classic, distrust of the establishment. Classic, I get my news from Democracy Now!, but also from these other kind of, like Jimmy Dore or whatever that guy's name is, these very sort of far left. I mean, Democracy Now! I've been on, and I wouldn't put in this super far left category, but definitely a progressive anti-establishment view. But Jimmy Dore and all of these people on YouTube, this is a guy who is, I thought, kind of was an emblem of this younger generation that, they don't watch the news. They get their news from YouTube, and YouTube shapes their worldview. And when I went back to him, he said, I don't think I was right about this. I wrote a Reddit post that suggested the Clintons killed him. And now that I think about it, and when I hear what you, Andy, are telling me, I don't believe it. And, I wish I could apologize to the Riches, but I'll leave them alone. He was one example, but then there was another guy out in the Bay Area who stood by it and said, the Clintons would do this, and you're not going to say anything that's going to convince me. And indeed, even when the book came out, wrote me a nasty email that said, I'm not going to read your establishment corporate media propaganda, because I know what I know. And what I know is that the Clintons are capable of doing these kinds of things, or at least the people in their world are. And so you see these different trajectories, and you see how this psychology works, which I just thought was so fascinating, if also a bit disturbing.
Very disturbing. I did a series of focus groups back in 2018, and one of them was with a bunch of Obama-Trump voters, which I imagine a lot of people are probably like, who are those people? Those people actually made more sense to me. A lot of them were like, Trump was changed, Obama was changed, and now Trump is changed, and I just want change, blah, blah, blah. It's crazy, but the group that really was nuts was this group in Miami of voters who voted in the 2012 election, but then in 2016 they either voted third party or they didn't vote at all. And I remember talking to one of these voters, and I was like, well, so what did you think about, why didn't you? Because she goes, I hate Trump. Trump was awful. I couldn't vote for Trump in 2016. Like, it was just I couldn't do it. I go, well, then what about Hillary Clinton? She goes, well, I'm for universal health care and gay rights and civil rights, and it's just that Hillary Clinton killed all those people. And I was like, what? I'm like, do you mean like?
Wow. Yeah, because that's based on the Clinton kill list or whatever. Full disclosure, I voted third party in 2016. I did not vote for Jill Stein, though. I voted for the only candidate who was not under FBI investigation. I voted for Gary Johnson. And yes, I realized that he made the Aleppo mistake. But I just felt like he had the most reasonable position on reproductive rights and on legalizing weed and some of his other stances. And I would never vote libertarian ever again. But he actually seemed like a fairly rational libertarian. But he clearly did not have the world diplomacy experience that he should have had. But in his defense, Hillary and Donald were both getting Secret Service updates. They were getting updates every day at that point in the campaign. And he was not included in that. Neither was Jill Stein.
Like her Iraq war vote or her policies. No. She has a kill list. The kill list. And I'm like, what are you talking about the kill? And then a couple other people in the room are nodding. And I was like, where do you get the kill list? Oh, Facebook. And I'm like, this person has certain progressive views, doesn't like Donald Trump, and is still just totally clear on the idea that the Clintons have a kill list and could kill people.
Yeah, it would amaze me to the degree to which the Clinton kill list or the Clinton body count is the other name that gets tossed around for this thing. It amazed me how much that conspiracy theory is just in the air that people breathe. That it is almost implicit. When I asked some people about the Clinton body count, because I was trying to connect it to Seth. I mean, obviously people said, oh, of course, Seth Rich is the next name on this list, joining, depending on who you ask, like 24 to 500 other people. They said, well, I mean, it's of course they kill people. It's like asking them, do trees grow up from the ground or down from the sky? And well, of course they grow up from the ground. And of course the Clintons just kill people when they get in the way. And, it's the one chapter in the book where I sort of break from the narrative, the present day narrative, and I go back in time. And I go back in time to this horrible tragedy in the 90s that I didn't even remember, in which a woman who'd worked in the Clinton White House in like the tour guide, I mean, you would know the name for this better than I would, but had worked in the tour guide, taking people around, reception office. She was an intern. She did her internship, left the White House, was working in a Starbucks in Georgetown here in D.C., and was killed in an attempted armed robbery. Again, nothing was taken from this Starbucks, just as nothing was taken from Seth, which is kind of a key pillar of the conspiracy theory. And yet this woman Katie Mahoney became just part of the gospel. She became another name on the list, and her family dealt with it just as the Rich family did. And the fact that it happened in more or less the pre-internet era, it just shows like how enduring this kind of thinking is. And I mean, I don't know if there's anyone, maybe except for the Kennedys, an American family in politics that has become such a magnet for this stuff as the Clintons have. I mean, I'm not like casting my lot in, poor Clintons, gosh, but it's true though.
Yeah. And look, I mean, when I read that part of the book, I had not heard that story yet before, but it's interesting in that, we've debated on this show before, like, is the internet fueling conspiracies? Is that the cause? Is it not? And clearly, conspiracies have been part of American politics for a very, very long time, since the country's inception. And I think the conspiracies floating around the Clintons are evidence of that. Obviously, this gets supercharged in the era that we're currently in. I mean, the conspiracy probably would have just stayed on the internet if it wasn't for Fox News. Can you talk about how the lies about Seth Rich and WikiLeaks ended up first on FoxNews.com and then all over the network's primetime programming?
Fox, it's important to understand, does not originate these kinds of theories, does not originate these stories, whether we're talking about Seth Rich or we're talking about the great replacement theory that Tucker Carlson loves to talk about. Tucker Carlson did not come up with this. Sean Hannity does not come up with anything. But Fox is the place where if a story, a conspiracy theory like Seth Rich or The Big Lie gains enough traction in the world of Fox viewers, usually online, usually in these forums or on, sort of fringier websites.
Or through politicians as well. Dana Rohrabacher was involved. He flew out to England while he was running in the 2018 campaign to try and regain his seat. He flew out to visit Julian Assange at the Ecuador embassy so that he could try and get the Hillary emails that Trump was trying to, like, he skipped over that too. Because Trump had asked Russia to hack her, basically. And they tried that same day, from what I remember. Dana flew out, and that was completely used against him. That's the only way Harley Ruda gained the seat, is because his entire campaign was based on the fact that Dana Rohrabacher was too tight with Russia, and he was a conspiracy theorist.
It's like the gateway pundit. It goes upward, it goes upward, it goes upward, and then eventually it gets to Fox in some form or another, either on foxnews.com or Fox News opinion side, primetime. And so Fox it's really the center of the conservative media universe. It is the ultimate megaphone. It is the ultimate validator for these kinds of stories. And so what you have with this Seth Rich story, the way I depict it in the book, is you have a reporter for Fox News, a talking head for Fox News and Fox Business, and then another Fox News on-air commentator, who the three of them get together and they set out to try to prove the conspiracy theory. That is the starting point. Is Seth Rich was the source for these emails that WikiLeaks dumped into the presidential election and changed the election, helped elect Trump. It was not Russian intelligence, despite what everyone who is an expert in the space says. And we're going to set out to prove it. And, I draw on a lot of documents that would later come out in court to show how this happened, how this story on the fringes online makes its way to Fox. And it's just like a absolutely fascinating inside glimpse at how a story comes to life at Fox. And it's also just incredibly ironic because Fox loves to talk about how people in the media, like me, like you, we have all these preconceived notions, or we have this sort of thing we want to prove, report, write, whatever, predetermined, and we just go around looking for, biased facts to confirm what we already think is true. Well, that is what Fox did in this case. Yeah. Fox, when I say that, I mean it. Like, there is a draft of the story that would eventually be published on the front page of foxnews.com and go viral all over the world. There is a draft of that story where all of the key lines, like Seth Rich was the source, are bolded, and the reporter for Fox says, I need to confirm all of these things.
Oh, God.
Like, I need to confirm them completely. And it's in an email to this other Fox News pundit, this other Fox News commentator, and that is what they ultimately try to do. The story actually gets published at Fox, even though to this day they're never able to say who their source was for any of this, and they're certainly not able to prove it. Again, as I see this Dominion stuff coming out, I just think of, wow, the Seth Rich story was like a precursor to this, a preview, a tremor before the earthquake kind of thing.
Offline is brought to you by Cariuma, the cool sustainable sneakers loved by surfers and skateboarders. They're reimagining classics.
Let's pause here because I am going to need to clip the video. I have to do some cropping so that you don't see the ads at the bottom of the screen. And then I'll come back and do a part 2.